Okay. Okay. Mikdad Kaddu Baryamuzura, and presenting today's webinar with my friend Emmanuel Yenji. Are you hearing? Hello, Sarah.
Yes, we hear you. We're just on mute. So
Yes, we hear you fine.
So you can get started with your presentation now.
I start, yeah? Thank you. My name is Mikdad Kaddu Baryamuzura, and I'm presenting today's webinar with Emmanuel Yenji. You first go back to the topic.
Yeah. I
bit of. Today's topic is titled Modern Day Conflicts Resolution in Natural Resource Management, a case of international diplomacy, and today is 10th of May 2018. And in the first image of the introduction, you see people some are on the ship, others are being pulled by the ship, and they are most likely to drown because some of them are young children, young boys and girls who can't easily swim in these deep waters of the ocean, and it's usually as a result of conflicts that have outbroken in their areas of stay. And clearly you see that these people are from some of these countries that are affected by the conflicts, most especially in Libya, north part of Africa. And in our next slide, it is a definition of terms. It is a definition of terms. We are defining the main concepts in our topic, that is natural resource and natural resource management, conflict, and international diplomacy. Natural resource simply refers to anything that people can use, and it comes from the natural environment. According to the environmental journal, that's how they define it. But other sources such as the Wiki dictionary, that is Wikipedia, they define natural resources as materials or substances that do occur in nature and can be exploited for economic gain. For example, soil or land is a natural resource that can be exploited in human economic ventures such as agriculture and infrastructure development, known as built environment. For example, the construction of roads and buildings, and it can be used for economic gain. Then, natural resource management, because in this term we have natural resource, which is already occurring, and then management. Management are the interventions that are put in place to ensure proper use of these natural resources. And usually, these management techniques or theories are there to ensure that people, if they're using these natural resources to attain economic gain or to sustain themselves economically, they use them with care. Then conflict. These are forms of friction or discord that arise within a group of people because of defying views, concepts, and usually hidden issues, and they tend to resist changes and other unacceptable ways in society. And if not controlled, they can result into danger. This danger can result into immediate unexpected migrations like the people we've seen in our first image, or death. Then conflict resolution. Conflict resolution, these are just measures that are done to ensure that normalcy prevails during or after a conflict, because usually conflict can happen, and in its course of happening, measures are put in place to combat it, or after a conflict has already happened. For example, a conflict may have happened in 1950 and we find a solution in 2018. So that solution can be used to prevent future occurrences of the similar conflict that may happen because of the similar reasons, because of the issues that may have led to the conflict that may have happened in 1950. And usually in this resolution of conflict, there are usually steps that are done. And one of the major steps that is usually done at this stage of conflict resolution is known as conflict analysis. Analysis simply refers to the thorough study of issues and consequences that may have led to a given conflict. And it's usually during this process of conflict analysis that immediate measures that are feasible can be put in place to combat the conflict or the future occurrences of a similar conflict. Then, international diplomacy. International refers to relationships between different countries or different states that are transboundary. And then diplomacy are the use of peaceful negotiations between countries to achieve a common goal that is usually aiming at safeguarding sovereignty of states and its citizens. Then because when you've looked at a conflict, you've seen the definition of a conflict, what it means. Then you have to first study the elements of a conflict. Elements are usually the bits that when they are there, a conflict is most likely to happen. If any bit misses in these elements, the probabilities are high that a conflict may either happen or may not. And it's usually these elements that determine the magnitude and the intensity of the effects of a conflict. Elements are usually three. They are known as the 3 Ps, or the P, try. The first element of a conflict are the problems. These are usually the root causes of a conflict. And if the problems are there, the conflict is most likely to happen. And if problems are not there, there are chances that a conflict may not happen. And for example, the case of North Korea and United States of America. North Korean people had have problems of poverty, food insecurity, and because they were separated with their brothers and sisters of the South. Now, such problems may usually escalate and result into conflicts. So when you find that the people of North Korea don't have any problems, the chances are high that a conflict may not happen. Then the next element are it's known as process. The processes. Processes. I looked at processes as a system of issues that flow in a community, and it usually triggers conflict. And usually, this process has bits and dots plus stages. When these bits and dots connect in the different stages, it's most likely that a conflict will outbreak in a community. Then the last element, which is so vital, and if it misses, despite of the fact that even the problems and processes may be there and they may be visible, the chances are high that without this last element, the conflict may not happen or will not happen. These are the people. And usually in the people, we refer to the people, the human beings, or known as the Zenjinthropus. This element usually relates to the way how people feel in their emotions about a certain issue. That is to say, how people feel can lead them into depression and resentment that usually results into a conflict. Because usually when a person is having a free mind and is settled and is contented with whatever is happening in the community or in their society, the chances are high that a conflict will not happen. And you usually discover that people that usually have problems with their feelings or people who are depressed, the chances are high that these people will most likely cause conflict or will most likely be affected by conflict. For example, when you look at the people that are treated badly by their governments, usually governments that have dictatorship, when the dictatorship levels escalate, these people will have problems with the government, and those problems without people organizing themselves in a process, and they result into a conflict. Then our next issue, as far as conflict resolution in natural resource management is concerned, are the theories. Why do we look at a conflict? And is it in our interest to look at a conflict? Because conflict is something inevitable in each and every society. Without a conflict, mankind doesn't develop. And it's usually conflict that signals of development, because when people are developing, there are usually things that they consider and things that they look at that they are supposed to be given, or their rights that they are supposed to receive. And if denied these rights and the privileges, people will obviously riot or conflict between themselves. So, is it in our interest to look at conflict without going into further details of conflict causes? Now, when we're looking at a conflict, it is fundamental that we look at something known as a theory or conflict theories. The theories, I define them as observations as secondary data obtainment that usually drive us into getting the full details of how something has happened, the potential causes, and how it can be solved. Without going into further studying of the causes, potential outcomes, and how something is caused, you can't clearly study it. You can't easily get to the last bit of it. Now, the theories that are there in as far as conflicts are concerned are three. And the first theory, which is widely accepted, has a lot of issues to do with it. It's known as the structure theory. The key word in this theory is the structure. Why structure? Structure usually refers to the breaking down of a complex bit of something, because a conflict is usually complex. A conflict doesn't usually happen alone. It usually involves a lot of issues and stakeholders in a complex bit. So when we are looking at it, we look at it in a complex way, known as a structure. And this theory is related to the major orientation of a society, how people are arranged amongst themselves and how they relate with one another usually results into conflict. One of the major scholars of modern today sociology, a man that existed in the 18th century that we are still relying on his knowledge, a born of Russia, but by that time it was known as Prussia, Mr. Karl Marx is one of the major contributors of this theory. And he based his reasoning on this structure theory as economics. And he related it to the way how people are economically. And his thinking was that poverty or wealthiness of a society can result into conflict. How? When people are so poor, when the people are on the poverty line, there are chances that those people will get depressed and it will result into conflict, because people are poor, they are depressed, they have no option but to riot. Then on the other hand, when people are richly blessed, for example, the people of Iran and Congo, these people are richly blessed with the natural resources. For example, the people of Congo. The people of Congo have a resource known as coltan lumbertine, or some people refer to it as cotton. Now, this metal, one of its features, has great high energy retaining capacities. So it's used in the making of phone batteries, laptop batteries, and other batteries. So we find that because its composition is rich in Congo, there are chances that people will fight for it. Then another theory is known as the individual theory. The individual theory was laid down by a man known as Freud. Now, this theory focuses on a person at the individual level. How a person behaves is most likely to result into a conflict with other people, because it's usually people that are ill-behaved that will cause conflict. I would mention some people, but for matters of anonymity, for example, because we are talking about diplomacy, international diplomacy, and in international diplomacy, sovereignty is given high value. That's why I can't mention some people. But you'll find that, for example, the president of North Korea, His Excellency Kim Jong-un, his behavior, it is his individual nature that had caused conflict with the United States of America. Then the other theory is known as the social process theory. Now, this theory is so crucial and critical as far as conflict theories are concerned, because for it combines the first two theories, the structure and the individual. Now, the social process theory puts its emphasis and study on the structure and the individual theory. How? It combines the way how an individual relates. Because in a structure, there are people, they're individuals. Now, the way these individuals behave will result them into forming other more and more groupings that will usually result them into conflict outbreak. Now, before I conclude, let me first give my friend Yenji, because we are discussing this topic with him, to take you through the effects, the potential effects and outcomes of conflict. Though it is not included on the presentation, we shall add it on our submission in the presentation before we conclude.
Yes, we have seen a number of conflicts all over the world over natural resources, and not only over natural resources or over some other issues that has also greatly impacted on the natural resources that we have worldwide. Uh, for example, when we take a case study of Sudan region, Darfur, it's blessed with a lot of minerals, for example, oil and gas. There has always been constant conflicts over those resources, over over its management, and this has greatly also affected the environment around such areas. So this also affects the sustainability of the environment in the long run. When you look at the African region, for example, the Nile Basin countries, there have always been conflicts over water resources and on how to use these resources. For instance, you hear Egypt and Ethiopia are conflicting over the Nile, or Uganda and Tanzania over Lake Victoria, and this has greatly also impacted them. And this has been due to some of the reasons. Like, for example, when we look at Uganda case with Tanzania or Kenya on Lake Victoria, it's mainly over the misuse of the water resource, like Lake Victoria, or issues like overfishing, issues of pollution, issues of overusing the waters has greatly led to conflicts. And when there are conflicts, usually within countries, there's no better management of resources, and this impacts on the natural resources. When you look at Congo, our neighbor in Uganda here, it is endowed with a lot of natural resources, as my friend Kadu had just explained to us. So you hello. So you find that most of these natural resources are always endangered. For instance, the areas that have conflict, always the animal species, the plants are always destroyed because of the destruction from war activities, like bombings, destroys them and chase away these animals. Recently, UN Environment wrote a publication about the uh, wildlife animals that are born in South Sudan. Because of the conflict, there's always displacement of them. And when you look at a case scenario like Syria, where there's conflict currently, people are trying to evacuate some of the wild animals in these conflict-prone areas in a way of trying to save them. For example, there's an organization, I've forgotten the name, it's trying to move some of the lions which are in this area so that they can be kept well in a safer place. So that maybe after the conflict, they can be relocated back to the environment. So there are always so many negative impacts of conflicts of our natural resources on our environment and also the natural resources itself. So I urge that maybe if we can get to understand some of the reasons as to why people are conflicting over these natural resources, or mainly, I think mainly it's because of an equitable sharing of resources. For example, when you look at these countries whereby there are conflicts over natural resources, you mainly find that there's the problem of an equal sharing of resources, and there's a problem of political instability uh, and insecurity that greatly increases the fight over these natural resources. So, as for today, I would like to conclude and
Yeah. I thank my friend Yenji, because we studied with him environmental science, for helping me to go through with you the outcomes of a conflict. Now, in my conclusion, because we are looking at something complex in nature, besides conflict resolution in natural resources management, the main issue of today's topic is the international diplomacy. How different countries relate with one another as far as conflict is concerned. We would have looked at the different stages of conflict, but I'll talk about two stages. The first stage is so critical. It's known as the latent stage. And it's usually in the latent stage where the conflict is not observed, it's not seen, but it's within the people. People may be in conflict, but it may not be seen outside seeing, whereby you won't realize that a conflict is there. Then the next stage of conflict is violent, whereby it is seen and it's usually in its final stages. Now, in my conclusion, I will call upon all the different stakeholders who are usually the opinion leaders who have direct bias in our communities, whose word or say is final, such as the religious leaders, politicians, scholars, and others, to really go into the details of potential conflict causes and devise the potential solutions to it. But above all, the major aim that needs to be addressed as far as effective conflict resolution is concerned is to do thorough integration of all people. With integration, I mean complete inclusiveness of all societies, plus consideration of the people's different beliefs. Because when you're devising a policy, you have to integrate the people's behavior, because you never know. One of the reasons as to why people conflict, maybe it's in their nature. For example, the migratory communities, who are known as the nomadics, will always be seen as people who are conflicting in areas where they have migrated to. But if we integrate that nature and their culture when we are devising policies to curb that issue of their migration, it's most probable that we shall put a clear resolution to these conflicts, because the population dynamics and demographics are always changing. Even the way people perceive different issues has changed. Today, the world population is estimated to be at 7.6 billion people, while it was 6.7 billion people 10 years ago. So, who knows that increment of 1 billion in populace of the people has greatly contributed to the conflict. So when you put that increment of 1 billion people in great consideration, then dealing with international conflict in as far as natural resource management is concerned will be dealt with in a proper manner. Thank you. I conclude my submission. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask anything. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Welcome. Welcome. Thank you, sir.
Very informative. My first question
Pardon?
is, do you have a solution to the sources of these problems? Like, what would you recommend as a development tool that can be used to reduce conflict?
I've gone to,
Oh, you
for
were
example,
on
in
mute.
Syria.
Kadu, you were on mute. Could you start over with what you were responding?
Pardon?
Your microphone was muted, so I didn't hear your response.
You restart.
I wish that one. The presentation.
No, not the presentation. We
Okay.
heard the presentation, thankfully. But just your
No.
response to that question.
Just the answer to the question.
Okay. My answer to the question, yeah,
Yes.
is proper understanding, thorough analysis of the people, the way people are organized in a society, and you integrate their different beliefs in as far as policy is concerned when you're developing a resolution to these conflicts. For example, when you've gone to, right now Syria is in conflict. So if you happen to go to Syria to provide a solution to their conflict, you have to first study the way these people are organized, the way these people relate with one another, and this you can easily get it from observation of the society or through secondary data, because usually a conflict that is happening now in 2018 may have happened sometime back, for example in 1950. So when you get that secondary data, it's usually in that secondary data where you will find some recommendations that may have been put in place by the people who try to solve that conflict. And it's usually in those recommendations where you can get some facts and you integrate it into yours and you find a clear solution to the problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome. Hello.
Alvaro or Yunez, did you have any questions?
Are there other people who have questions?
Just it's like how to you do it for like considerate and integrate all the people, like in a city or in a zone, because it's really difficult when you have like more than 3 people taking decisions or looking for solutions. How you coordinate this? Everyone needs to be included.
Yes, thank you, Alvaro, for the question. How can people be integrated? Because in my conclusion, I began by talking about the opinion leaders in our communities. The opinion leaders are people whose message is usually taken with great honor by these people. For example, religious leaders. A religious leader can easily convince the people that are following him or her in as far as integration is concerned, because integration clearly goes down to the root causes of a potential conflict. And when during the process of integration, you usually preach, usually sensitize, usually use different media. For example, you can use songs because many people attach their feelings to songs. You can use campaigns, for example, acting, for example, drama. And it's usually in these different ways of communication that people can easily pick a message. People who love music are easily convinced through music, and people who love drama can easily be convinced through drama. And it's usually after that convincing of these people that you ask them which way is best for them to be engaged in as far as a resolution development for a certain conflict is concerned. Because when you're engaging people at all levels, that is simply integration. That is simply integrating these people in the policy forming. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm clear now.
Thank you so much.
Eunice has a question, it looks like.
Yeah, Sarah, do you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you so much. I'm in a place that it's difficult to speak, but anyway, it was interesting to react because I was not in the beginning, but I can understand what's the presentation about. But my question is really what we see now, the conflicts, especially about the natural resources, in the first place. We see, it's a bit complicated. The situation is more than what we can imagine. What's important for us now. There are some numerous conflicts, but what's important for us now, it's like it's like the adaptation and to find some solutions. And you said that arts in general, drama, movies and music, and they can, and even science, art and science are some great how can I say, Sarah, des facteurs importants.
Common denominator? Like something that brings like something we have in common, I think.
Des facteurs importants pour attirer l'attention du public. It's like some factors that can we use to attract, I can say that,
Yeah.
attract the major public. But anyway, I think it's a bit complicated because there are some stakeholders that are putting some barriers or some really the art and science can transmit a message, but in the end they have not the decision or even the right solution. Yeah, but anyway, I would like if you have some ideas about yeah, we have conflicts, that's obvious, but what I would like to know is, or to discover or whatever, It's like what some solutions. That's what matters for us and the adaptation. And yeah, that's my question.
Okay. 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 Thank you, Yunus Bodil. And when some of the way through which we can engage all the different stakeholders, because it's usually the stakeholders, as we talked, in the different elements of a conflict.
Yeah.
The stakeholders are the people, and as far as the elements of conflict are concerned, the major way through which we can engage these stakeholders is to understand the issues that are behind their conflicting, what has driven them to conflict. Then the other issue is to know their position, their standing, and their perspective in as far as a given resource is concerned. Then the other issue is the interest, because in a conflict you always find a party against another party. So when you clearly understand the different interests of these different parties in as far as that natural resource in contestation is concerned, you can easily develop a solution to the conflict. Because if you know that the interest of this party is great and the interest of the other is also great, then it will take us to another issue, which is the value. The value is simply an attachment these parties attach to a resource in contestation. For example, we talked of a resource known as cotton that is in Congo, the Democratic Republic of Congo. And the values that these parties attach to this conflict, to this resource, can drive us into developing a clear solution. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.
I'm going to throw
Welcome.
that question back at
Thank
the
you.
group. Alvaro and Inez, do you have any comments to make on that? What do you think could be potential solutions or ways to find that common piece that will bring people together to resolve conflict? And let's say, for the sake of
I think
I
think like
the cause of the conflict is going to be poverty. Sorry.
okay. When the conflict affects one part of the population and not all the parts, for example, when we see, for example, in climate change, the principal person that are affected are the poor people. We need to produce some feeling or some common feeling to the rich people to see this, like with solidarity, I think is the word. Like in this case, we need to find the way for like how to reach the other part of the population. I think it's difficult. I am with the Baryamuzura. Sorry, I can't say your name fine.
Kadu.
Kadu?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm with Kadu when he said that the music is useful. I think the music is useful because all of us, at least we learn or we remember one or two songs from our like really early childhood because they are attached in the bottom of our mind and in the bottom of the heart. So I think it's very useful when we use music to reach the feelings, and with that convince people that is not affected directly to be more in the solidarity with the feelings or the people that is affected. So I think the music is a good form to reach the other people.
Yeah, go ahead, Eunice.
Okay, thank you so much. I definitely agree with Alvaro about what he said. I don't know if you saw the late video clip. This is America. It's
Yeah.
very. I liked it very much. It's like reflecting a big reality. You know, it's like something that exists. You know, and I'll be giving you an example about you know, I've been seeing talking about now. It's like to find solutions that to transmit this message, you know, to say, yeah, we have this problem, we have some conflicts, we are not happy with this, you know. And I saw a big movement in Morocco, some young rappers that are, I mean, doing a great job. It's like, you know, it was not like before, you know, it's like something, it's like they say, hey, yeah, we exist and we are not happy. They are critiquing the government. They are critiquing some how to say, some politicians, some, you know, some stakeholders, and you know, it's like something very new. But what I said, it's like music still, you know, just c'est un moyen. How to say, Sarah? C'est un moyen. It's like
I don't know that word. Sorry.
it's like a tool. It's like a tool for I found the word. It's this is it. It's like yeah, to transmit this message, but the solution, I think, still complicated, and and the proof, it's like what's still happening in the poor countries, what's happening in Syria, what's happening in Iraq, what's happening in some numerous countries. You know, we are in peace here, but in another place there is some numerous conflicts. I don't think it's a bit, it's not a bit, but it's very complicated. You know, there is some efforts, but we need more to really, you know, I don't know when, but we hope really to see our world in peace, because each one of us has the right to live in peace and in dignity and in freedom. That's the everyone has this right, you know. And you know, unfortunately, we see the opposite, and we really hope to see our words, to see the world in a better place, like they say. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Eunice. Yes, it would be awesome to have a world in peace and without conflict and wars. And that's, I mean, there are people who will say, there are religions that say that we will never, you know, there will always be poor people, there will always be war, we'll never solve that completely. But you know, that's something that we need to continue moving towards, and we can always improve on. And we can definitely reduce the amount of conflict and suffering and war and poverty that exists in the world. So one thing that I think is another tool for you know, solving conflict is something like the Sustainable Development Goals. So this is kind of a different take on how to solve conflict, but I think setting those goals and having an established kind of methodology of, well, what are we aiming for with when we try to resolve conflict? Like what are things that people need to not be in conflict? Well, they need, the natural resources on land, on water to be safe. They need clean drinking water. They need access to toilets. They need, they need reliable food sources, weather conditions that aren't threatening them on a regular basis. They need education. They need rights for women. They need rights for minorities. All these things that are outlined in the 17 Sustainable Development Goals are things that reduce conflict. And obviously, each country has to find different ways to make those accessible to people and to, to achieve those goals. But having that outline of something, just a basic outline of human rights and human needs, I think is a good place to start with reducing conflict. Because then once you get those goals, it kind of starts a conversation of, well, how do you relate to these goals? How can you contribute to these goals in your own community? Like what are your needs? And that allows for the different stakeholders to participate in that discussion. And it kind of gives them a starting spot. Any other comments on this topic? Anything? No? All right. Well, thank you so much to Kuda as well as Emmanuel for the awesome presentation today. I really appreciate the discussion at the end as well, so thanks for everyone who joined. Our next call, we are still finalizing the details for May 20th and May 30th calls. But on the 20th, Michael will be presenting. I believe he's also from Uganda, if I'm not mistaken. And then on the 30th, we have, who's going to present? Oh, Tayyab from Pakistan. So neither of them have decided on what their topics will be or the time, but I will get that to you as soon as possible. So, and then I'll send out that email with, I'll definitely send out the email to you all with the recordings from last month, all right? But we only have this month and next month of online youth exchange, so make sure you're talking with your partners and giving, and just, making the most of what we have left. I think just about everyone on this call today has attended enough webinars to be able to receive their certificate. So you guys are, the people who are on most of them, so thank you. And then I think, Saad, you're the only person who still needs to present a webinar, if I'm not mistaken. So we can talk, the two of us, about how, when you can present if you're interested. All right? Right. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Have a great day.
Bye.
And
Bye.
thank you.
Take care.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.